A wise man once said that nothing in life is certain except death and taxes. But for UFC fans, there are few more things we can be sure of. Like Conor McGregor committing crimes and showing his little ding-dong off to the rest of the world. Or John Jones committing crimes and simping after the little ding-dong of hairy Russian men. And of course, there is the inevitable, impending failure of Khamzat Chimaev's immune system, as he commits crimes like scamming his fanbase with meme coin rug pulls while jumping up and down on the little ding-dong of his favorite dictator like he's Nina Drama on Dana White's casting. That shot came pretty close to hitting me. But yeah, today, let's go right to the edge of what will get me kidnapped and thrown into a forced labor camp in the heart of the Caucasus and answer the question that fans have been wondering about since UFC 279. Is Khamzat being champion a disaster for the UFC and MMA? So to begin our examination, let's start from back when he first started his journey in the UFC. Khamzat made his UFC debut back in 2020, where he finished John Phillips and Rhys McKee within 10 days of each other. Then went on to KO Gerald Meerschaert a little over a month later. And at the time, Khamzat gained a load of hype because of how often he was fighting and how dominant his finishes were. But then, he got hit with his first bout of severe illness, when he contracted the virus that I can only refer to here as Zikuf. While infected with Zikuf, Chimaev was, quote, coughing up blood, and apparently it was so bad that one doctor misdiagnosed him with cancer, which is what caused him to declare himself retired back in 2021. It also led to his fight against Leon Edwards getting cancelled 3 times, although one time it was because Goat Law's son got Zikuf instead. However, after some time to recover and a proper re-diagnosis that showed it was just a viral infection, Khamzat unretired and came back to strangle Li Jingliang out cold. He then went on to have that war with Gilbert Burns, where he went to an impressive 29-28 decision against the man who got KO'd by Dan Hooker in the first round, and lost by a dominant 50-45 masterclass to the real welterweight GOAT. After this fight, the hype for the Chechen was at an all-time high, until he missed weight by 7.5 pounds in what was supposed to be a public execution against Nate Diaz, who was fighting out his contract with the UFC. And remember, Khamzat was told by the doctor to stop cutting weight because of how bad he was cramping up. So this wasn't because Khamzat was pulling a Calvin Gastelum. It was because of serious medical issues that the Chechen was having. But regardless of a doctor stepping in to keep him from making weight, the UFC and medical establishment were perfectly fine with locking the wolf in the 8-sided cage against another trained killer the next day. To their credit, it was the right call, since Khamzat produced his most dominant victory to date by ragdolling Kevin Holland and submitting him in the first round. Because, absolutely destroying Mr. 4570 with a grappling onslaught totally hasn't been done before or since. It's not like Brendan Allen submitted Holland much earlier in his career or anything. And well, after this tremendous win, Khamzat waited out for over a year, doing God knows what. But it's all good in the end, since after this fight, Khamzat moved up to middleweight, where he got a majority decision win against Kamaru Usman on short notice, who is 2-1 against the guy who got ragdolled by the GOAT of the sport. After this win, Khamzat got booked to fight Robert Whittaker at UFC Saudi Arabia. However, this is when disaster struck for Khamzat, because just 9 days out from his fight with the Reaper, he withdrew due to having a violent illness that left him hospitalized. And this was when we saw all those horrific pictures of him come out. The ones of him looking like he was on his deathbed. That one photo where he looked like a dachshund that aided bees. However, Khamzat was able to power through that, and in the end, came back at UFC 308 to submit Bobby with a face crank. But ever since his win over Whittaker, Khamzat has become even more careful with his health. He is now self-quarantining himself to make sure he doesn't get ill, and also is working with TJ Dillashaw's strength and conditioning coach in order to improve his cardio. I repeat, he is working with TJ Dillashaw's strength and conditioning coach to improve his cardio. Now, I'm not necessarily accusing anybody of anything, but do you guys happen to remember what substance TJ Dillashaw popped for after his title fight against Henry Cejudo? Yup, EPO. And what does EPO help with? Cardio. So yeah, if Khamzat has much better endurance from this point onwards, don't be surprised. The UFC wouldn't dare let him test positive anyways, since he's the third biggest star they have behind Ilya and Islam. But setting that aside, let's have a look at Chimaev and his battle with the effects of the long kuf, as I have to call it here. According to the Mayo Clinic, there are over 200 symptoms of the long kuf, including heart disease, mood disorders, stroke, blood clots, and scamming your fans with crypto. However, the most interesting thing it says here is that the virus that causes the big kuf can upset immune cell communication, leading to autoimmune reactions. And while nobody from Blood Clot Chimaev's camp has said he has autoimmune disorders, that's what a lot of fans speculate he has. And then there's the fact that Boris has had half of his thyroid surgically removed. Now, the thyroid is an important gland which regulates the way that your body uses energy, and having it affected can affect, guess what? Autoimmune responses. So yeah, there's a significant amount of evidence pointing to the fact that Chimaev has the immune system of a 60-year-old babushka. But how about injuries? Well, one thing we all know about Khamzat is that he trains hard. And according to many of his training partners, a little too hard. And according to what Khamzat himself has said, he's had 5 to 6 surgeries and 7 or 8 fractures. Like, Chimaev is essentially saying here that he doesn't even remember the exact number of surgeries and fractures he's had. And while he says that he has been focusing more on recovery in his training camps, we won't know if that approach works for him until we see him being more active. So what we can tell about Khamzat is that he likely has a compromised immune system, is injury prone, and has averaged 1 fight per year since his win over Kevin Holland. Just for some perspective, Khamzat Chimaev beat Li Jingliang 1 month before Alex Pereira's UFC debut. In 2025, Chimaev got his first title shot. In the same amount of time, Alex won the middleweight belt against Adesanya, lost it in a devastating KO, moved up to light heavyweight, won the light heavyweight belt and became a double champion, then defended the belt 3 times against multiple former champions before losing the belt, and is now scheduled to rematch Ankalaev. And while Pereira's activity is a little bit insane, other champions like Dricus du Plessis, Pantoja, and Ilia Topuria have been taking a minimum of 2 fights per year. And since Khamzat as champion would have much more control over when and where he fights, it's highly likely that the middleweight strap would be defended once a year or even less under his reign. And look, I can see all of you Chimaev fans crying in the comments right now, typing, But you can't say that for certain, you're just a Khamzat hater, as you wait outside a London McDonald's for the staff to bring you the Deliveroo order that you need to take across town. And to that, I have to say that you need to judge a man by his past actions. Or, in Chimaev's case, the lack of action over the past 3 years. But now, let's look at the upsides of a Khamzat Chimaev title reign. Khamzat Chimaev is, without a doubt, one of the last remaining stars in the UFC. He has been the biggest star in the middleweight division ever since Adesanya got dog-walked by Mr. Jab Jab Teep Teep, and I could see the Saudis, Qataris, and UAE paying exorbitant site fees for his fights. While I don't think there's any way that Chimaev could achieve mainstream stardom like Conor McGregor or Khabib Nurmagomedov did, he could certainly become the face of the modern UFC if he remains active. And as a final note, I want to speak very briefly about Khamzat's close connection to Ramzan Kadyrov. Now, Kadyrov is very clearly an insecure prick, considering how he beats up on Chimaev in sparring to assert his dominance and control over him. And if Khamzat is to become a long-reigning champion, there's a high likelihood that Kadyrov will parade Khamzat around like the Soviet Union used to do with its Olympic gold medalists, which will take time away from Khamzat's training and fight camps. However, I doubt that being a part of Kadyrov's propaganda machine is going to hinder Khamzat in any serious way. We already know that he can fight in the United States, and it's unlikely that the UFC will go to Western Europe with Khamzat when they could go to Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates instead if they want to put on an event in that time zone. There might be some issues with bringing Chimaev over to the United States if the Republicans are ousted from power and Dana White loses his connections in the American political establishment. But since the next US elections are in 2028, Khamzat will probably be out of the title picture or even retired by then. So yes, what is my final verdict on Chimaev being champion? Well, to be honest, I think there's more bad than good when considering his activity and proneness to injury and illness, but it could help boost the popularity of the UFC in the new Paramount Plus pay-per-view-less era. And middleweight as a division is pretty stacked right now, with top contenders like Rainier de Ritter, Nasruddin Imavov, Caio Barrio, and Anthony Hernandez. So if Khamzat is too inactive, or vacates. An interim or vacant title with some legitimacy could be pretty easily made. Anyways, that's the end of this video. I made a video hating on DDP's dream, so I had to make one being negative about Khamzat Chimaev in order to balance it out. Goodbye, and watch Ryzen.